Hey Jen, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Ladies, this is my good friend Jenn Boughey, and I'll post her Instagram handle in addition to a PDF document that she has for y'all. Jenn is somewhat of a new friend in the sense that we actually met last year because we both have boys that were in second grade. This year they're in third grade. And had a couple conversations and had tried to get together like forever. We finally did about a month ago. And I told Bray, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like just talking to a version of myself. It was
Same.
amazing. And as we were talking, did I mention that Jenn is also a life coach? I don't know if I've said that yet, and what's the name of your business?
It's Uncommon Grit, life coach.
Uncommon Grit. So we had so much fun talking and sharing. And I was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be my guest speaker for the month of December. And so I was sharing with her a little bit about the content for December on being unshakable in a shaking world and life and everything, in addition to how we become unshakable is believing 100% that we matter, and shared with her my story of depression and how for me when my life drastically shifted was when just that little slight element in all the elements of life was believing that I matter and self-worth. And so Jenn, the ladies and I have talked a little bit about that this month already with a couple trainings. So when I mentioned to Jenn the topic, she was like, yes,
Yes,
I'm here for that. So
yes.
she's going to share a little bit about that. I do feel like we were laughing and joking ahead of time. We talked for a few minutes before we hit record, but y'all, my face, do y'all see how flushed it is? We're in this new house and like the heat situation is like steaming in one spot, freezing in another. So I'm like roasting right now. That's what my face is so red. So I feel like I need to like explain that.
It
But
actually just looks really great with your shirt. It looks like you've put on beautiful blush. So I think
it's
it's
on
working.
brand.
Yes, it's working for
It's
you.
on brand. So but anyway, Jenn, I know and I don't know where you want to start, but I do want to, and I feel like just in the conversations that we've had before, that there was a huge pivotal turning point in your life as it relates to self-worth and establishing and discovering your true value, A, just as a human, but B, as a believer. And spoiler alert, through being kidnapped.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Share a little bit about that.
Yes. And I think this is really why I'm so passionate about when you talked about being unshakable and having self-worth, because that really is the foundation for so many things in our life. And it's really how we hold ourselves, how we value ourselves, how we value what we bring to the world. And so it's really a really big thing. So self-worth was actually something I didn't have, which is actually why I was getting myself into these situations that were relationships that were very, very, very unhealthy for me. A lot of that being because it was not modeled for me. I had a kind of a chaotic background coming up. My parents were divorced at a very young age. And so I really didn't have the model for that. And because I didn't feel worthy and I didn't feel valuable enough to be treated in a correct manner, I ended up getting myself in these relationships that were very, very unhealthy and very chaotic. And in many ways, right, we model what has been modeled for us. So I was just getting myself into the same exact situation that was ultimately my relationship with my parents, very unstable, chaotic, unsure. And so I just walked into a really bad, abusive relationship. It was towards the middle of my college years, actually, but it was towards the end of my college years where it began to get so abusive that I didn't really know how to get out. And in fact, it was one of those things where I realized, holy moly, I am in over my head. What am I going to do? And so ultimately, I'm a fighter. I'm resilient. That's one great thing that I think my upbringing has given me. So we don't want to look at the bad, right? We also want to give credit for the good. And so part of my hard upbringing, it also brings great qualities that I'm really thankful for. And one of those is being a fighter. And so sure enough, as I was trying to break away from the relationship, yes, he kidnapped me and he held me captive for over 17 hours. And it was in the midst of the unfolding of that, of really having to press charges and go through 18 months of court cases and ultimately fighting for my life because I was still getting threats that he was going to take my life. I really began to realize what life was really all about. And I stopped pointing the finger at everybody else. And I really stopped pointing the finger at my circumstances and what life had kind of fed me, or what I was brought into, or I didn't have parents who did XYZ. I stopped blaming and I started taking responsibility. It was a really, 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 really big shifting point in my life. And when I started taking responsibility, what I did was I began to empower myself, and I was able to make choices based on the fact that I have the power to do something different than either I was taught, I was modeled, or what I've already had done. And that was really, really big for me. So I went from victim to empowerment. And in that, it was a course of several years. I mean, this is not like it happened in a month and it was done and great. There was a lot of healing to be done. And I still made mistakes after that. But with every mistake, I realized, what could I do different? And I'm going to stop pointing the finger. And so whenever I graduated college and I came to Atlanta to live, that's really actually when I became a believer, because that's when I handed my life over to Christ, because I realized I can do all the counseling I want, and I did, and I loved it, and it was excellent. But ultimately, I needed that supernatural infusion of belief, someone telling me that's greater than myself, that I have value, I have worth. And I took his beliefs and I started to instill those beliefs inside of me, versus taking what the world had told me, what my circumstances had told me, what my parents had told me. I was eating on those beliefs, and they were destroying my life. They were destroying who I was. And the more I fed on those, the more it became this backward cycle, or this downward cycle of, I was becoming worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and more and more and more and more hopeless, and doing more and more things that were actually the very opposite of where I wanted to be in my life. So when I took on the Lord's beliefs and I began to infuse those into my life and said, if he calls me valuable, if he calls me worthy, if he calls me beloved, then I must be. And I'm going to stop believing those things, and I'm going to start taking hold of what he has to say about me. And ladies, this is not easy. This is hard work. This is when you were like in the trenches, in your car, you're frustrated, you want to pull your hair out because it's like your subconscious wants to do something different, but you have to be awake enough in your mind to be able to fight and say, no, I'm going to do something different. And so that was a really pivotal part. And it's really why I got into this whole mindset counseling world, because I realized the power of your mind is really, it changes the trajectory of everything that's in front of you. And it's why the Lord says, take every thought captive. And that verse has become incredibly powerful for me, because I realized truly the power of taking our thoughts captive.
Oh my gosh. Pause for a second. I have got to turn off my light because of the way my son, and I do it to them every time. So much better. Every time I do a training, I like throw myself into the screen. They're used to it, but
I love it. I love it.
I am seriously like, I think I'm about to start crying, because I love so much what you just spoke to these women. I'm like, if they were like here with us live, I'd be like, oh my gosh, now do y'all believe me? This is like, I feel like our words are just so similar. Like, you didn't even know what I've actually talked about this month. And it's just so,
that's awesome.
Such a great reminder for them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm literally like fighting back tears right now. So amazing. So when you think in terms of this self-worth and value and changing the trajectory of our lives, and I appreciate so much that you said, like, this is hard work, ladies. I try to tell people that I'm working with one-on-one, or even in the group, and even on social media, I'm like, who you see today is not who I was, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I do think another thing that you and I have always had in common is we have both been like on this pursuit to like personal development, and are obviously through the lens of our identity in Christ, and walking fully in our purpose that he has created us for. And I know for me, I don't know that you've struggled with depression. I don't know if we've had that conversation, but so much of my anxiety and my depression was the absence of a deeper purpose.
Mm.
It was like my mind had so much extra time on its hands that it just filled it with so much garbage, scrolling social media, comparing my life to someone else's at the time, not being content where I was. And so, as far as it relates to what do we do as women when we are seeing, oh my gosh, yeah, I have this like idle time. I love that you pointed so much to where God says to take all of our thoughts captive. And my kind of verse for that I do is to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And for so long, yes, there was so much renewing of our minds, especially for you and me both, where we became these like radical conversion experiences at a young age. I was 19. So I was like, just this constant, indwelling of the Spirit through the Word, renewing my mind in that way. But then God has given us other tools, scientific based tools to also use to renew our minds and be transformed. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes. When I think about self-worth, the first thing that comes to my mind is really, if we were to boil it down, and I'm really big about making things simplistic, because when we make things complicated, we're like, what happened? I'm out. We literally check out mentally. So let's simplify this. Your self-worth is all it is really your opinion of who you are. And the opinion of who you are is ultimately the thoughts that you have about yourself. That's really all that it is. And so why that's so important is because we oftentimes take meaning out of what has happened in our past. It's just the natural human brain. If you think about, like, one example I like to give is if you struggled in math growing up, okay, you weren't really great in math, and it's your senior year and you're like barely making it through, you might make the meaning, I just stink at math and I'm never going to be good at finances. Like, gosh, I'm just awful. So you might take that meaning and you might have that thought over and over and over and over and over again every time you go to the bank, every time you get a credit card statement, whatever it may be, every time you might come into like a little financial bump in the road. And if you keep telling yourself that thought, what happens to that thought is that becomes a belief. And your belief is a state of being, which means, all that means, a state of being is that that's who you become. It's who you are, because you've thought that thought so many times. You've had that opinion of who you are so many times that it becomes a part of who you are. You just begin living it out. So you might wake up at 32 and be in a financial disaster because you've had this one thought over and over and over and over and over again. And it might be reinforced by circumstances, your parents saying, golly, can you just get your finances together? Right. And you just begin to believe it. Okay. So what you can do though, is we also have the ability to take on any meaning we want. And just because you've taken on a meaning from the past that might not be useful, you've actually seen how it might have hurt you, you have the absolute ability to go back and what I call slay that belief and say, no, I'm going to choose a different meaning. So your new meaning for this silly example could potentially be, I really struggled in math growing up because I wasn't really applying myself. But as an adult, I really want to apply myself. And the best way I know how is I'm going to learn as much as I know how. And then I might outsource it, right? Go get a financial advisor, get accountability, have worksheets or Excel spreadsheets. You don't have to be bad at math your whole life because you've taken on one thought from this one particular instance. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. I love so much what you said. It is seriously. So guys, Jenn, isn't her certification is not through the same one as mine, but she does understand the model that I've been
Yes.
teaching y'all and talking to you about as far as it relates to self-coaching and what I do with clients one-on-one. But what she is talking about, and that's what I tried. We started off when I first opened Deliberate Membership, talking about our circumstances. And what I have, shared with them is that you can have 5,700 different circumstances. And what you're going to start seeing is your thoughts have had meaning that you've attached to 900 million different circumstances because of a story that you've told yourself.
Yes.
And now is the time to kind of stand above that story and recognize whether or not that actually is true. And it's not. And so we have attached meaning to so many different thoughts that we apply to so many different circumstances. And so I call it, like your toddler brain and then your grown-up brain. And so as you were saying, like, you actually do have the ability to choose a different meaning. And that's not like a hippie woo-woo choose a different meaning, but like your brain's choosing. Like, whether or not you want to recognize that or not, your brain is choosing. And because it's been so used to choosing the trash for so long, which has destroyed your self-worth, now you know better, you do better. So you start saying, okay, I'm choosing these different thoughts now. I'm choosing this different meaning. That is old. That has no place in my life anymore because it is not true.
Yes. So let me talk to you a little bit about whenever we make meanings, we also create a belief ladder, which I'm sure you guys will learn about if you haven't already. Yes, okay. So you have these belief ladders, and what you do is you go to find evidence to believe I am not good at math, and I'm not going to be good at my finances, or I'm going to fail at this, or no one's going to like me, or I'm never going to be invited, or my family is never going to fully accept who I am. You fill in the blank, the circumstance, and you can go all day long and go find evidence for that. But what I also want to challenge you is that if you choose a different meaning, you will also find the same amount of evidence. You just have to look for it. And this is the part of your brain called the RAS. It's called the reticular activating system in your brain. So what the RAS in your brain is set out to do is it's set out to go find confirmation bias, okay? So if you believe something, if you've made meaning, if you're set on the fact that this is true, you will go out and you will look for it and scan for it and you will find it. My example for this is if you want to go buy a blue Honda, right? We've all been here. We like get obsessed with a new car, whatever it may be. You want to go find it. And now you're driving down the street and what do you see? All you see are blue Hondas because you're looking for them. They've been there all along, but because you're finally eyes wide open looking for them because you're searching for it, you find them. They're everywhere. We literally, it's so funny because we do this every time, which we don't buy cars often, but when we do, it's like, oh my gosh, how does everybody have the car I want? Well, no, they've been driving all along. So the same is true for whatever meaning or whatever belief you want to believe about yourself. And so I would really, really challenge you in the next couple of weeks, whenever you feel that you're believing something that may not be very useful for who you want to become, just try on. I like to call with my clients, just try on a different belief. Just try it on. You're not committing. You're not going to have to hang out with it for the next 2 weeks because we like to be comfortable and sometimes ugly beliefs are more comfortable. But what we'll find if we just try it on for a couple hours or maybe for a day, we will actually start seeing that, oh, I wasn't left out. That friend over there, she did wave to me in the carpool line, or she did text me, or my mom did call me. Right? We begin to see things that we otherwise might have completely missed. And so I think that's really, really important for us to be able to see.
I love that so much. Is there anything else that you want to share based on the handout that you've provided for them that we didn't touch on, or any specific directives? I love that application you just gave them. Anything else that you would encourage or motivate, especially during a crazy time of year, double, triple, quadruple, because it's also the holidays. So is there anything lasting you want to leave them with?
Well, I think for me, it goes really down to, Amberly said it, your narrative. What you're telling yourself about yourself is what you will become. And I think it feels so basic, it feels so simple, but it really, really, really is true. And so when you think about who you're telling yourself you are, so then you become that person. And so oftentimes with my clients, like the number one thing that I say is we have to gain awareness, which I know you guys are already doing. But when you gain awareness, sometimes we have the ability to go into judgment. We start judging ourselves. We start saying, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't be thinking that way. Or this is a bad thought, or this is a wrong thought. What I really want you to do is have awareness and then have compassion. Have compassion with yourself, with the fact that you're learning, with the fact that you're opening up your mind. And then I want you to get really curious and ask yourself, where is that thought coming from? Or where is that belief coming from? And being careful of the should statements are really stemming us more into shame, right? So we don't want to shame ourselves on top of judging ourselves. So building awareness. What was my second thing? Building awareness, of having compassion, and then being curious and asking yourself, where is that stemming from? Where is it coming from? And then I want you to try to replace it with a thought that is going to give you the narrative that you want to ultimately live out, because you are worth it. So if you tell yourself, I'm always a failure, I'm never going to succeed at this, and it could be more subtle. It could just be like, I'm not a great friend. Well, if you tell yourself that, then what happens is you build up the self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're not going to be a good friend, because you're going to start thinking, which is going to create the feeling, which is going to create the behavior, right? You guys know this. And so, but again, the same could also be true for the flip side of it. If you tell yourself, I am a good friend, you're going to show up different. You're going to hold yourself higher. You're going to probably make those extra phone calls or send those extra texts, or maybe put a card in the mail to somebody, and you're going to become the person that you tell yourself. So pay attention. What are you telling yourself? What's the narrative? When you think about, when you think about Amberly, or you think about Jen, like, what do you think about? And be honest, be really, really honest with yourself, because I think in the honesty is really where the growth happens. And that's where we have the opportunity to really start changing some of our beliefs.
Thank you. The whole time you were talking, and you probably know this quote also, you may not, I don't know. And I haven't really even shared that this much with them, but I just kept hearing you say should and should and should. And have you heard the whole statement, don't should yourself?
Yes. Don't should yourself. Yeah.
Don't shit yourself. So
Yeah.
anyway, but we do that, don't we? So, and now every time I'm like, oh, I just should myself.
Yep. And one good thing is I'm really big about replacing. Like if I can't say something, then what do I say? So you can always put could or would. So instead of I should have not thought that. Well, I could have not thought that. That feels so much more kinder to ourselves.
I could stop yelling at my kids. I could have a better marriage soon. I could stop being so anxious,
Yes, exactly. And it feels so much better. And it allows us to embrace our humanness, because none of us have this figured out. We're all walking. I mean, I'm different than I was 2 months ago because of just the continual work of being open, being aware, and realizing how my thoughts really do drive everything that I do.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so, so much.
Yes.
For sharing with us, for bringing such value and new, just even another new ideas, new thoughts, new challenges for us, and super excited.
Yes. Well, I love what you are doing here. Amberly is awesome. Y'all are in such great care. And I'm just so excited for all that you guys are learning and doing. This is awesome.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.